Breaking news. First time ever, AC-130J Ghostrider uses all guns to sink Narco-Submarine. That headline from December 24, 2025 it's more than just a military first. It's really the flashpoint of a conflict that's just escalating in the Caribbean.
It's an incredible development.
Before we get into the sources that detail this whole story, a quick appeal to all of you listening. Subscribe to Defense Reports. It's your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me with Aurea for the latest deep dive by Defense Report, where we do sharp, no-nonsense breakdowns of global defense news, military tech, and, well, strategic developments. And today we are covering the unprecedented military campaign that is shaking the very foundation of Latin American security.
Yeah, it's a campaign unlike anything we've seen in the region for decades. We've spent a lot of time going through sources on this, and what stands out is the sheer scale of the 2025 naval deployment.
The scale and the speed.
The scale, the speed, the rapid escalation, and the legal and tactical controversies that just inevitably follow when you use this level of force.
And that speed is what really makes this a story we had to dive into. I mean, think about this. How did a mission that was, initially framed as a simple counter-drug operation, how did that morph into the largest U.S. military buildup in the region since 1994?
That's the core question, and the answer is really about the application of force. We're talking about high-tech U.S. air assets.
Including that AC-130J from the headline.
Exactly. The Ghostrider. These assets are operating in the Caribbean and the Pacific for the first time, and that just fundamentally changes the calculus of power right there in the Western Hemisphere.
We also have to be really clear about the human cost and, the conflicting stories here. Official U.S. sources are citing 105 alleged narco-terrorists killed.
But that number is. It's heavily disputed. It's shadowed by accusations from leaders in the region of extrajudicial murder, some involving fishermen.
And finally, we're going to unpack how all of this tension in South America is explicitly linked to lessons learned thousands of miles away.
Yeah, particularly from the war in Ukraine and the naval dynamics we're all watching play out in the Red Sea. The military is integrating these lessons in real time.
Okay, let's break this down. Let's start with defining the target and the stance that really set the stage for all of this, for Operation Southern Spear.
Right. So the kinetic part of the campaign, the actual shooting, that began on September 1st, 2025.
But the fuse was lit much earlier in the year.
Correct. The foundational move came back in January and February of 2025. That's when the U.S. administration designated several powerful criminal organizations as foreign terrorist organizations, or FTOs.
And that FTO label, that's more than just a name, right? It's a legal weapon.
It's everything. It completely changes the rules.
So which groups were we talking about specifically?
The list included the Venezuelan group Tren de Aragua, but also others like MS-13 and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel.
So big names.
Very big. And by classifying them as FTOs, the U.S. moved them past being just, a criminal problem. They framed them as national security threats that require a military response. The allegation was that their vessels were operated by narco-terrorists.
And that legal framing, that's what enabled the really shocking opening act on September 1st.
It did. A U.S. naval vessel engaged and sank a 12-meter speedboat. It came from San Juan de Unare, Venezuela.
And it killed everyone on board.
All 11 people, allegedly members of Tren de Aragua.
And that one action, that was historic, wasn't it?
It was. It was the first publicly acknowledged U.S. airstrike in Central or South America since the Panama invasion, back in 1989.
Wow.
The political messaging was immediate, and it was brutal. It signaled a definitive change in policy. They weren't just interdicting anymore. They were moving to lethal destruction.
And Secretary of State Marco Rubio, he captured that new stance perfectly in a quote that went everywhere. He said, "Instead of interdicting it on the president's orders, we blew it up, and it'll happen again."
No ambiguity there.
Absolutely none. Which then forces you to look at the sheer scale of the force being deployed.
And that brings us to the hardware. The list of assets supporting Operation Southern Spear is just astonishing.
But here's the thing. If the target is these fast, lightly armed speedboats or those semi-submersibles, why deploy the world's most expensive naval assets? Isn't that complete overkill?
That's precisely the question. And the answer tells you the mission was always about more than just drugs. The first big increase we saw was in mid-August. That was the USS Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group.
Which is massive on its own.
Yeah. You're talking 4,500 sailors and 2,200 Marines. But the real game changer, the unmistakable geopolitical signal, that arrived in November.
And that was the supercarrier.
That was the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group. The Ford is the largest warship in the world. It brings 5,000 sailors, over 75 combat aircraft.
So when you add in the destroyers and cruisers, what's the total footprint?
The total personnel in the region swelled to around 15,000. This is the largest U.S. military buildup in that region, not related to disaster relief, since 1994.
That's a huge statement.
It is. You just don't bring a force that's designed to fight a peer adversary to catch drug smugglers unless you're sending a very, very clear message to a sovereign nation nearby.
So let's talk about the air assets that made that headline possible. The AC-130J Ghostrider sinking a narco-sub.
Okay, so the shift to air power operating from forward bases, like in El Salvador, that's key. The AC-130J, it's not a surveillance plane.
No.
It's a terrifying, highly specialized gunship. I mean, it is designed to destroy targets on the ground or at sea with missiles or just barrages from its cannons.
And what's so significant about using it to sink a low-profile vessel like a narco-sub?
It's just completely disproportionate firepower. We have planes like the P-8A Poseidon that are excellent at finding these small targets. The AC-130J, though, it provides the kinetic finality.
So the headline implies they didn't hold back.
Right. It suggests they used the full complement, the 30mm cannon, the 105mm howitzer, on a vessel that's often just crudely built to run drugs. It's a tactical statement. We are not here to capture. We are here to destroy.
And the other air assets they sent just reinforce that message, don't they?
Absolutely. The sources confirm F-35B Lightning II fighters deployed to Puerto Rico. F-35s are not counter-narcotics tools. They're fifth-gen stealth fighters designed to penetrate heavily defended airspace.
And then there were the bombers.
Yeah, in October. B-52s and B-1B Lancers conducted bomber attack demonstration missions near Venezuela's coast. That signals a long-range strike capability against sovereign military targets. This whole hardware package moves the operation out of law enforcement and firmly into strategic military pressure.
Okay, let's move from the hardware to the human cost, which has been the source of immense controversy. As of December 22nd, the numbers are staggering. At least 29 strikes on 30 vessels, 105 people killed, only 2 captured, 105 dead in just 3 months.
And the toll itself demands scrutiny. But it's the specific legal circumstances around those deaths that really sparked international outrage.
You're talking about the double tab controversy.
Exactly. The sources detail an allegation that a second strike occurred on that initial vessel from September 1st after the first engagement.
And this second strike allegedly killed survivors.
That's the claim. It allegedly killed 2 survivors. Now, officials said the goal was just to destroy the vessel itself to prevent it from being recovered.
But lawmakers saw it differently.
Some lawmakers immediately suggested that second strike could be classified as a war crime. It just highlights this immense legal gray area they're operating in.
Which brings us to the tension between the U.S. narrative that they're targeting FTOs and the counterclaims from governments in the region.
And we have to report both sides here. On one hand, the U.S. says it's focused on groups like Tren de Aragua. On the other hand, you have Colombian President Gustavo Petro publicly claiming a U.S. strike killed a Colombian fisherman and flatly accusing the U.S. of murder.
And the U.S. response to Petro was swift and severe.
A major diplomatic escalation. The U.S. retaliated by suspending large subsidies to Colombia and sanctioning President Petro himself. Meanwhile, Venezuela just denies the whole premise.
Their foreign minister called the designation of the Cartel of the Suns a vile lie to justify an illegitimate and illegal intervention.
And that back and forth confirms it. The diplomatic relationship has completely broken down. This isn't an anti-narcotics mission anymore. It's an open geopolitical clash.
So that brings us to the most critical legal shift. By mid-October, analysts were already saying the objective had moved towards extreme pressure on Venezuela.
Right, and then you have former President Trump acknowledging strikes inside Venezuelan territory were on the table.
And here's where the legal framework just changes everything.
Yeah.
October 1st. The U.S. formally notifies Congress that it is in a non-international armed conflict, an NIAC.
Yes, with unlawful combatants, which they defined as the cartels. And this declaration is a total legal game changer.
And also,
under normal law enforcement rules, you can only use lethal force if there's an immediate threat. But by declaring a NIAC, the U.S. is applying the laws of war.
which lets them kill enemy fighters even if they aren't an immediate threat at that exact moment.
Precisely. It provides the legal basis for all these sustained lethal strikes we've been documenting. It transforms the situation from policing to formalized warfare against these specific groups.
And that legal shift immediately put land targets on the table.
Immediately, U.S. officials started identifying potential targets at the nexus of the drug gangs and the Maduro regime. We're talking ports, airstrips. And by December 22nd, officials were saying, soon we will be starting the same program on land.
A dramatic escalation.
Which prompted a military response from Venezuela. Sources confirmed they deployed 5,000 Russian-made Igla-S man-portable surface-to-air missile systems.
Man-pads.
A lot of them. It's a clear signal. Venezuela is prepared to challenge U.S. air superiority. They see this as a defense of their oil interests.
And the ultimate economic escalation came in mid-December with the U.S. fleet intercepting and seizing oil tankers.
Yes, imposing a de facto blockade. They seized the tanker skipper.
Seizing oil tankers is definitely not an anti-narcotics mission.
Not at all. That move effectively transitioned Operation Southern Spear into an integrated economic and military campaign designed to choke the regime's funding.
It really did. And this is the perfect place to bring it all together, to connect these operations in the Caribbean back to broader European and NATO security, as we promised.
Because you really can't view this operation in a vacuum. The military leadership is actively tying these theaters together. The lessons being generated right now in Ukraine and the Red Sea are being integrated directly into U.S. doctrine in the Caribbean.
You mentioned Naval Special Warfare Commanders stationed in Europe. What's their role?
They're active with CTF-66 in Europe. Captain Eric Skalski, the current Bill Frog, the longest-serving SEAL, is helping lead the U.S. Sixth Fleet's newest task force. The knowledge they're gaining there, monitoring Russian movements, training with NATO allies, it's immediately applicable.
So what are the specific lessons from Ukraine and the Red Sea that are being applied here?
It's all about managing asymmetric warfare. The threat from unmanned systems, the tactics of non-state actors who have state support. Major General Stephen Edwards, who commands special operations in Europe, he emphasized that this training reinforces the ability to rapidly deploy combat-credible forces everywhere.
So the techniques they're perfecting to anticipate, say, a Russian move or a Houthi attack, those are now being used by forces in the Caribbean.
Yes. The intelligence, the surveillance, the engagement techniques used to hunt a slow narco-sub are being honed by the same framework used to anticipate an Iranian-backed drone attack.
So Operation Southern Spear is less about fighting cartels and more about testing an integrated deterrence model against a hostile state, or at least a state proxy.
Precisely. The fleet, the advanced aircraft, the NIAC status, targeting economic infrastructure. It all points to one thing. This is a modern test case for integrated deterrence. Which leaves a question for you, the listener, as you sort of digest all this. Does designating criminal groups as unlawful combatants fundamentally change the nature of international military intervention in the 21st century?
You've been listening to Defense Report, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.